It's not in the face! Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Hey Not the Face with your host John Nash and your producer me, Steffi Haynes. And today we are going to talk about a whole bunch of different topics. We're going to take a look at the UFC White House card. We're going to take a look at Francis Ngannou's contract. We're going to talk about USA boxing and Bud Crawford's retirement. We're going to talk about some things Bernard Hopkins had to say, and Golden Boy and DAZN possibly splitting up. We have so many things to talk about, but if you want to hear all of the things that we talk about, you're going to need to pick up a paid subscription, because without that, you're going to miss about half of the good stuff, and we always put the good stuff behind a paywall. Now, John, how the heck are you?
I am good. I'm back in LA. Went from below freezing weather, below zero weather, to what's going to be in the mid 70s this week. So it's a nice change.
And what's the weather like there? Because I saw this thing today that says that LA has been covered with like a land fog for like over a month.
Well, the one today was nice out, except for one problem. I have lung issues, and the air quality is terrible when I got in town. And I'm hoping that blows away soon, because I love the warmth. That part I love. Hanging up Christmas lights in the freaking below zero weather was not fun. So I love the warmth, but I could do with some much better air quality. With the bad air quality, I can't enjoy the sun. I got to stay inside with the air purifiers going nonstop.
All right. So I'm glad you're back in the warmth. I hope the smog lifts soon. Now, I need to make some notes here. As you all know, we didn't have a second show last week because John was preparing to leave and was rushing around doing a bunch of stuff for his mom in preparation for Christmas. So we have two really good shows set up for you, starting with today. I want to address our listener questions. We are still working on half of those. So we're going to, combine those, and it'll probably be next week, maybe even the week after Christmas before we get to them, because we have guests. Now, I'm not going to give it away who we have. We're just going to surprise you, but we have a guest for Thursday, and we have a guest for the beginning of next week. Now, next week, we're only going to have one show because it's Christmas week. So, we are going to get to Ryan Harkness and Eric Hamidi's questions, but it might take us a little bit. We are working on those. So I just want to put that out there right now. So, John, we're going to get this thing rolling. Now, as always, we like to start with UFC antitrust stuff. So remind everybody what this Thursday's UFC antitrust hearing is about.
Well, it's an originally unscheduled hearing. It's a new hearing that was put into the schedule in response to all the shenanigans going on. And I don't think there's much is going to happen there. Really, the hearing is supposed to be about the plaintiff's search term proposals. In other words, what the fighter side, what they want the search terms to be, that the UFC has to go through all their electronic data, medium documents. And if those are hit with those terms, they got to be pulled to be looked at. So that'll be the terms they get to use and the scope. And then the other part will be the scope of Dana White and Long's testimony for the sanctions hearing. So that will be the main portion. I also think there's a chance the defendants, I think they filed an appeal regarding the arbitration. So that will probably come as well Thursday. So the most interesting part, I think, for listeners will be, we will get some information regarding the possibility, probably not even a possibility, more information regarding when, where, and how long Tracy Long and Dana White will have to testify to Judge Belwer.
I've been wanting to ask you this for the last few days, and I have to get it out before it fleets from my mind again. But Do you think that they are communicating in code now because of all this discovery stuff? Like they don't use the word contract anymore. They use a different word. Like maybe they've got some code system going.
It's possible. I'm gonna do a Eugene Robinson here and do a segue into a story I know. Back when I was younger, some people I know, one of them was dealing drugs. They were drug dealers. Let's just be honest. And they were communicating about dealing drugs. And one guy brought up the thing that we should have a code. So when we're on the phone and talking, we don't ever use the word drugs. And he proposed that for cocaine, the code will be underage prostitutes. And the other guy, are you insane? That is worse than what we're doing. And then so my thinking, the people we're talking about here, I wouldn't be shocked if they came up with the code, but I also would be shocked that that code was even worse than when they're being accused of.
Here I'm out here thinking we're gonna have to get like the World War II Indian code breakers in there, and you're over here talking about prostitution. Okay,
well, that goes hand in but that goes very, considering Dana White's the case he had, which was hidden for years, about flying someone to Brazil, a Mann Act violation. I think that's kind of fitting.
She was underage.
She wasn't. The Mann Act is just taking someone across state lines or internationally. So she was not underage. She was not, but he took her to Brazil, which is the violation where the violation of the Mann Act would have potentially come in.
Ah, well, there you have it. But still, I was thinking Indian code breakers and, the
Enigma machine and things like that.
Exactly. Yes. I was thinking things that were much more mysterious, and you're over here like, you're just throwing it out there. Anywho, we should probably move away from this before we really spin out.
Yes. Our Substack might get flagged. So.
All right. So per Puck newsletter, UFC has been courting sports betting companies to take over for DraftKings next year. What do you make of that? Because we were just talking about DraftKings last week.
Well, a couple possibilities. I don't know for sure. I haven't deep dived into this. I haven't done a ton of research just with the information we've heard from Puck and other news sites. But just the top of my mind when I start thinking about is that one is the deal is done and they want betting sites because that's a massive revenue for them, massive amount of revenue. I think it was the DraftKings was paying him something like $20 million a year in sponsorship fees, plus an additional $50 million in marketing they would do. So when DraftKings would do marketing for themselves, they would include UFC on a price about $50 million. So that's tons of free advertising basically for the UFC, or part of the deal for the UFC. And so they can cut their advertising budget on the UFC because this is being taken care of by DraftKings. So part of it is that they want to replace that. They leave the other thing. That it says to me that DraftKings, perhaps because of Polymarkets, is thinking of getting another partner because they do not want to be in conflict with this challenger upstart that's going to pick apart at their business model. And so they might be looking to go somewhere else instead of being on the same platform the UFC is Polymarket. So that's my two thoughts. But the key thing is the gambling market, sports betting, is really important to the UFC. I mean, really important. As you saw, the DraftKings 20 million plus 50 million advertising, that is not chump change. That is a massive amount of money as a sponsorship for a fight promotion annually. The money side and the marketing, the additional marketing budget that they put in. So that's huge. And then on top of it, I think there's, the UFC keeps bringing up gambling, and we see PFL advertising how much that they're going to have like live odds and things like that during their events, because the amount of people that got into sports gambling in the last 10 years is a major part of the audience now. That drives the audience. So it works, hand in hand, is that you make tons of money off the marketing of sports betting, but sports betting brings in the audience, which allows you to charge more from the other broadcasters, from your broadcast partner and other sponsors. So it all works together on that front. So my guess based on that is perhaps DraftKings is worried either that the UFC is asking for a lot more money, or that the Polymarket is a rival of theirs, a competitor, and they do not want to be on the same platform with them in the future.
I have an alternate question for you that just popped into my head. Do you think that if DraftKings and UFC don't find some common ground and find a deal to be made, that DraftKings could possibly be the savior of PFL.
Well, I wouldn't say savior. I mean, I wouldn't be shocked if they went to PFL, but the amount they're going to be willing to pay PFL is going to be a fraction.
But wouldn't that be enough to save them? Because they don't operate the way the UFC does.
Yeah, I mean, that's true. They don't need as much money as UFC. They don't expect as much, but even a fraction, if you're getting a fraction of what they're paying the UFC, I mean, right now, if DraftKings is paying $20 million, you're talking UFC's getting like $200 million in sponsors. You're talking about 10% of their revenue. If they cut that into a quarter, that's a large amount for PFL, but they still need more money than that. I mean, if they're they're not making any money on anybody else, they're still struggling.
But they are. I feel like they're going to get a broadcast deal somewhere, but
they're going to get a broadcast deal. But the question is, how much are people going to pay them for that broadcast deal?
But this could be something that could tip the scale, though. It could be the difference maker. I guess that's what I'm saying. By save them, I don't mean just DraftKings all by themselves, but it could be the difference maker that tips the scales, and from being, in the red to being in the black.
Oh, that's very possible. If they get a decent enough deal, a fraction what the UFC is doing, but a decent enough deal that picks up the gap between whatever their broadcast partner is paying and how much they need to make, then that's plausible. I could see that, but we'll have to wait and see. I just don't. Right now, I'm not very confident that they're going to get the massive broadcast deal that they were hoping for. Let's put it that way. So I'm not sure what sponsorship can do to pick up the slack.
One final question on this. Do you see any picture on the horizon where UFC could capture both DraftKings and Polymarket? They already have stake, that they can make it, they could balance it all and possibly get DraftKings to stay.
I'm not certain about that, because I think they're too much in direct competition, the two. So, and isn't DraftKings, and I could be mistaken, isn't DraftKings getting into the same kind of as Polymarket? So they are on multiple fronts. One is they're getting in the same business as Polymarkets, and Polymarkets probably has an exclusive deal with UFC on that. And that's another possibility. Maybe because DraftKings getting into that, it breaks the contract in the future. They're no longer allowed to be sponsored by UFC. That's a potential possibility there as well. But then the other problem is, even on the sports betting side, you're in competition with Polymarkets. You don't want them picking into your market share on that. So I just don't see it. I don't think there's room, I doubt there's room on the broadcast for all those partners. It's
got to be frustrating for DraftKings, because when Polymarkets came out, DraftKings had already picked up their version of Polymarkets way before this deal was in place. So it makes me wonder, and I'm sure you probably have questions too, if there was already trouble in paradise with UFC and DraftKings.
Yeah, maybe, but I don't know. I think that DraftKings has been fairly happy with the UFC. The one thing is the UFC does is they are perfect for betting, because they, this is, what gives them a step up over boxing is because the UFC brand is so strong, because it's no longer the fighters drawing the fans as much. They can really, because they have such control over the fighters, they can book a lot more parity fights, a lot more 50-50 type fights that draw more action on the betting. And so they are perfect for that on the gambling side. That brings in more bettors because they think they can get more value, because there's, they realize there's a lot of fans that are not as informed. And that drives people to DraftKings and other sites. So I think, the gambling side of the UFC, they've really, Endeavor before, and now I guess TKO has really tapped into that. Really tapped into that. So I think the betting sites are very happy with being in partnership with the UFC.
Now, speaking of betting, I can only imagine what kind of betting is going to happen with the UFC White House card. But there's another facet of this card that kind of, it didn't take me by surprise, because it is going to be at the White House, but it was announced that they won't have any tickets for sale. And this is according to Mark Shapiro directly. Now, I can understand that, because, it's at the White House. They can't have every Joe Blow in America just, popping down a bunch of money and showing up at the White House card. But knowing how the UFC maximizes earning potential on their events, do you think they'll be able to top the takeaway that they had from the Sphere card from last year that you said was their biggest card ever?
Well, that's according to them. That was the highest grossing event they've ever had.
Yeah.
Which is, shocking considering they did 1.6 million buys for Conor McGregor events. Of course, that was with the UFC era. I should take that back because that was with the UFC era, and that's a flat fee from not UFC, ESPN era. And that's a flat fee. So no matter how much Conor McGregor sells, the revenue is not going to skyrocket. I think you'd have to go back to the Khabib fight was probably at least potentially one of the highest grossing events they ever had until the Sphere event. And then you add in the gate, which is over 20 million, the record gate, and whatever massive amount of sponsorship that the Saudi Arabia pledged for that event and paid. That's what made it why it was the highest grossing event of all time. Now, can this surpass it? It's possible with sponsorship and stuff, but I think they're not concerned as much with this being the highest grossing event ever, because the spillover effects, the ripple effects from this event are going to be tremendous. I mean, it's going to create a lot of looky-loos. A lot of eyeballs are going to come onto the event to check it out because it's just going to be a unique event. It's going to make their bond with Trump stronger, which might be a mistake considering his polling numbers, how much they're falling very quickly. But I think before the idea was that Trump would pay him back even more favors. And that thinking was probably smart. But again, it might not, by the time this event comes around, it might not be as smart to be doing an event at the White House with Trump's birthday. But the idea is we're going to do this favor for him. We're going to get more political favors from Trump. We're going to get a lot of eyeballs. We're not going to put this on CBS where we draw a huge amount of eyeballs. We're going to put it on the Paramount subscription service. So this is going to drive a lot of people to subscribe to Paramount. And so the White House is giving us this event, which can drive tons of subscribers to make our partner very happy. So all that's in the long run a positive for the UFC. In fact, for all we know, this White House event was negotiated as part of the Paramount deal, and that's why Paramount paid so much, because they knew they'd have this big spike of interest because they'd be holding an event at the White House as part of the negotiation to help get the deal across the line for Paramount and Skydance merger, which has been reported that merger and the FCC complaints against the merger were discussed at UFC events. So all that might be tied together. So that's the event, even if it's not the highest grossing event, it's going to set up the UFC for longer term success in the long run. Medium to long run, they will see more success because of this event. So I don't think they're, as much as they try to maximize all the time on this event, I think this is I don't think it's going to be a loss leader, because I don't think they're going to lose money. They will have big sponsors. They will make a lot of money from that. But it's an event that they could probably maximize the revenues more for the single event. But in the long run, as a repeat player, leaving some money on the table now will pay back in the long run, because they can start charging more in the future because the success that's going to be built off this one event.
All right. In 2025, only $8.5 million in bonuses was paid out to the UFC fighters. What do you make of that?
Not surprised, because I remember Scott Fontana. Scott Fontana. I know how to. Scott over at New York Post. He did an excellent piece from a few years back where he got the total number paid out in bonuses and then got the non-disclosed bonuses included. And I think it was 13 million. So that is all the discretionary bonuses the UFC paid in 1 year. And that year, I think it was 8.4 million in the fight of the night bonuses, right? So we went up 100,000, I think, maybe because there was a couple extra ones given out, or maybe an extra event this year compared to that year. So it's not surprising, because it's the 50,000 bonus, 4 fighters per night on average, 50,000 bonus each. We've had that going on for a decade now. And so that the number has been frozen, and that's not shocking. I guess we'll be waiting to hear what the big increase will be on the fight of the night bonuses. I'm going to take a gamble and say they're going to double it because that's what they're going to be offering boxers apparently for Zuffa Boxing. And I think it would be a bad look not to offer fighters the same. But doubling that would give fighters 16.8 million in discretionary bonuses, which is still going to be about 1% or probably less than 1% of the total revenue next year. So,
oh my God. So, all right, let's stick around here for a little bit in MMA before we move into boxing. Now, following Francis Ngannou's appearance on Ariel Helwani's show, where he said his contract is coming to an end and will be done before the White House event, there has been a lot of chatter about how Ngannou has somehow mistreated the PFL. Do you agree with that take?
No, if you want the short answer, I'm sure you want me to elaborate on that, but that's my short answer. No. I notice I don't know what it is about MMA fans, and this seems to be more common in MMA. Is there something about you have to be a team player as a fighter, a team player for your promotion? I don't get that. Fighters are independent contractors. They're self-contained businesses. They really should be selfish as hell, right? Because they're an independent business. They're not, there's no benefit to helping your company. You're not there. There's one thing being loyal to a company when you're going to work there 20, 30 years and you have a pension and stuff waiting for you. That doesn't really exist here. Now, I see the argument, well, PFL is paying him on the side to be as part of it. He gets shares in the African League and he gets paid an annual salary because of that. I think there's arguments for that, but also that was part of the compensation package they put together. That was part of the deal, so probably they didn't have to pay him as much. So I don't understand. I really disagree with that. The whole argument that he's somehow screwing the PFL over, especially the part when he says that he has one fight left or his contract comes up to an end towards the end of the March or whatever date. He says before the White House event, his contract will be up. Well, that's the way it works. He has a limited amount of fights, right? He signed a deal. He signed a 2-fight deal with PFL. And people are like, again, framing as though he screwed PFL because he's been turning down fights. But what fights has he been offered by PFL? Do we know of any?
Exactly.
That he's been offered and turned down? I haven't heard of any. I know that their contract deal was that he gets to go box and then he'll come fight for PFL. And it was supposed to be that he would come fight for PFL within a year of signing the contract. That got extended, which is why I guess when we keep saying up his contract has a termination date, my guess is because he had took that second boxing match before coming back to PFL. And that second boxing match was after the time frame. So his time frame coming back to MMA would be longer than originally in the contract. They extended the deal for another year. That's my guess what happened. And why that termination date we've had was off by a year is because he took that second boxing match instead of an MMA fight. And so they extended the termination date so that PFL would have the same amount of time in which to get him 2 fights. They gave him the first fight, and that was paid for by Saudi Arabia. The second fight, I have not heard of an offer, and I know they've been working on what Rico Verhoeven and stuff, trying to get a big fight. I don't know if the Saudis are interested in that fight. They try to get Deontay Wilder. I don't know, if that was too expensive. So the problem is PFL wanted Ngannou. They offered him the contract terms that it would take to get him. He could have skipped MMA and just gone into boxing otherwise. They got him. They got the press. They got the hype that they had the linear champion. They got to, bring that up all the time. And then the next step is they got to use him in one fight in Saudi Arabia, and the Saudi Arabia government, the PIF, paid for basically that event. And that's the benefit they got. And since then, the reason, you need to have a big opponent against Francis, partly because maybe Francis wants it, but also because that's the only way it makes sense. You're going to pay Francis close to $10 million. And part of the deal is you got to pay his opponent at least $2 million. Well, you better get a return on that. And if PFL has to pay everything themselves, I'm not sure they're willing to spend that money. So, for all the talk that Francis somehow screwed the PFL by, only coming for 2 fights, well, that was the deal, the agreement they agreed to. And second, I have not heard any stories that the PFL has been offering him bouts he's been turning down. The problem is PFL has not been able to get the big fights, which they expected to get. I think they legitimately thought, remember when they talked about we're going to have the super fight league?
Mm-hmm.
We're going to give 50% of the revenue of the pay-per-views to the fighters. And they signed Jake Paul. Well, none of the fighters none of the big name fighters from the UFC left the UFC to come over to cash in on these pay-per-views. And I think that was their expectation, that they would get some big fights they could put together, that other fighters would see what Francis got, other fighters would see the pitch they're making, and that they would get a few big names, and they got no one. They got crickets. And so I think that's the situation we've been left in. And Francis, I'm not saying he's a great guy. I think it's exaggeration, the bad guy stuff we're hearing right now. But the idea that he is not a team player, well, he's not a member of the PFL team. He's a member of the Francis Ngannou team. And right now, I do not know why he's getting blamed for just following and doing what his contract says.
Exactly. Now we're going to move into boxing right now. And some big news that happened last week was that Dana White and Nick Khan went to Texas, right here in Texas, reportedly to buy the rights to the USA Boxing's national tournaments. Is that a good business move for them if they were to do that?
Well, there's a couple interesting components to that. There was supposedly the U.S. team was in negotiations with another boxing promotion, and apparently strung them along, according to Sam Spira on Twitter, the manager attorney that represented Randy Couture and Woodley and other fighters, UFC fighters. For younger guys who might not be familiar with the name, that's what he said. I had heard before that it was Misfits Boxing that was negotiations, supposedly supposed to get a deal with USA Boxing. So, on a couple, one, it denied, if that's true, Zuffa might have denied someone else sponsorship of USA Boxing. And two, it gives them an inroads to make connections to these young up-and-coming fighters. And historically, Team USA, the Olympic boxing, has been it's not consistently a step towards stardom and pros, but a large number of people that excelled got medals on the USA team did advance to become stars in boxing. So your odds of being a star, if you get a medal for USA Boxing, seem to be higher than if you didn't. It's not a guarantee, but it is an avenue to get stars, and they have connections there. So it's smart that they're making connections with USA Boxing to try to rope in some top prospects.
Wow. What about MVP? Do you think MVP would be in the running to possibly be that other promotion they strung along?
No, I don't, possibly, but I'm pretty sure it was Misfits. That's the information I got. It was Misfits. I could be wrong, but
Oh, the only reason why I ask is because I know that Jake Paul has, remember when he came out and he had the USA boxing team or Team USA? Yeah, it was USA boxing team, and they walked them out. And it wasn't just the two women. There were some men that walked out with them too. That's the only reason why I asked that.
It's very possible, but the stringing along part, I should say, was that's my understanding was it was Misfits. But again, it's very possible. Maybe it's multiple promoters. Maybe Zuffa just blocked everybody at once.
I tend to err on the side of caution with what you heard. So yeah. Mm-hmm. All right. So, anyways, let's talk about the stakeholders in boxing, because I want to know what you make of their efforts or lack thereof that they've put into opposing this Muhammad Ali American Boxing Revival Act that TKO has put forth. They're getting ready to put forth to Congress.
Yeah. Well, for the most part, it's been pretty feeble. Sean Zattel had a video talking about some efforts, and he was, he was making a pitch that they should work together. But the efforts are, disjointed, not well organized. We've had a few people. Oscar De La Hoya wrote an opinion piece. Bob Arum submitted a letter to Congress that made its rounds recently. We've had a few other people. We had the WBA had their conference, and Hopkins and Shane Mosley were there, as well as Rob Macy was there from the MMAFA to speak on how to protect the current Ollie Act. But, for the most part, very few fighters, very few boxers, and very few organized resistance from the promoters. And one is completely missing is that, notice no one from PBC, except for Tom Brown, in support of it has said anything about the bill. So,
Yeah.
And then you have people like Lou DiBello says he opposes it, but wants to, he thinks it's a done deal and he will put no energy into stopping it.
To access the bonus content of this episode, you must be a paid subscriber. To do that, go to heynottheface.substack.com and subscribe today.
Ow! Ow! Not the face! Ooh! Ooh! Okay, the face!